Okay. At least one last name.
Roth.
R-O-T-H.
That's the easiest one.
That's the one. Is yours difficult?
Yeah, it's not difficult. It's just it's foreign. It's foreign-ish. Grinwald's.
Oh, I know
It's-
Grinballs.
no,
I don't have to spell that name.
Oh.
Yeah, there we go.
She probably knows Jeff.
I got it. All right. Whenever you're ready.
Some time ago, we received a letter from a 10-year-old girl named Amy who lives in Warwickshire, England. Amy writes, "Dear guys, I think it would be really fun for you two Americans to condense all of English history because you two are so funny and hysterical and handsome and clever and wise. Hugs and kisses, your fan, Amy." Mwah.
Well, Amy, this is exactly the kind of letter that really pisses us off.
Yeah!
Did it ever occur to you that maybe we have no interest in English history? Why can't Americans just do American history?
Yeah, we've got a culture too, you know, and a history.
Yeah, and it may not be as long as yours, but it's like my mother always said, it's not the length of your history that counts, it's what you've done with it.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Your mother said that?
Every night as she was tucking me into bed.
Wow. Okay, well, anyway, in our long and extensive research, we've discovered that most Americans are at best uninformed and at worst embarrassed of their history.
Well, damn it, we've got nothing to be embarrassed about. I mean, we brought the world its first democracy.
Well, what about the Greeks?
We brought the world its first American democracy. We put a man on the moon. We made Mark Twain, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Donald Trump. So you can't go telling us that we don't have a culture, little smarty pants, Amy.
We've all taken history classes, but what is the true history of America?
Is what we've been taught fact or fiction?
Find out in
The Complete History of America, abridged by Adam Long
Austin Tichenor.
and Reed C. Martin.
Shall we begin?
Let's shall. So the history of America all started with the Pilgrims.
Now we know what little Amy is thinking. Hey! This kid Columbus! He was the first person to discover America and they didn't even mention him! Yeah, 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 yeah!
His name wasn't even Christopher Columbus. It was Cristobal Colon, and he bumped into the New World by mistake. I mean, he wasn't even the first one here. I mean, the Irish, the Japanese, and the Vikings were probably here before him. Not even to mention a native population of over 90 million people.
But in defense of Columbus, he was the first person to ruthlessly slaughter and enslave the Native Americans in the name of Christianity, and he became exceptionally wealthy from the process. So in that sense, he was the first true American. Anyway, settlers come to rape and pillage, and then we come to the Pilgrims. Wiki, wiki, wiki! So the Pilgrims perfected the art of good living. They carved up a turkey and invented Thanksgiving. What? Lickety split just as quick as you please. We're a bad man, there were 30 colonies. Word! Hear ye, this just in the French and Indian War. The French and British at war again, this time in North America. In sports, the Patriots murder the Redskins.
Oh yeah, the British and colonists defeat the French and Indians. King George celebrates by imposing a tax on stamps, tea, sugar, and everything else he can think of. The colonists are up in arms.
Gather, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. He said with a grin while wiping his chin, if my ear was a
Bang! I hear a shot.
I hear a shot, monsieur.
You hear a shot, senor?
I hear a shot, young grasshopper.
Hear a shot, comrade.
It was the shot heard around the world, and a full-fledged revolution was underway. The colonists rebelled against the British government for imposing unfair taxes so that the American government could impose unfair taxes. George Washington, the commander-in-chief, led a tiny contingent of Minutemen. The Minutemen, brave soldiers ready to do battle at a minute's notice.
The Minutemen, American patriots fighting for liberty and justice.
The Minutemen, better lovers than you might think. It was the whole British Empire up against George Washington and his tiny army.
And so the Yankees brought the Brits to their knees by hiding behind rocks, behind trees. And finally, in Yorktown in the fall of '81, the British surrendered. The Yankees had won.
Give me an apostrophe! Give me an M! Give me an E! Give me an R-I-C-A! What does that spell? America! Just do it! From the blood of the British, the new nation was born.
And from the blood of the Native Americans, the new nation grew.
The nation grew and grew, and new parties emerged.
And finally, when the American dream was realized, the new nation began to crumble.
The Civil War, North versus South, industrialist versus agrarian. When the South seceded from the Union, the Civil War began.
The war that killed more men named Zeke than any other war in history.
Poor Zeke.
A moment of silence for all the lost Zekes.
But in the end, the North overwhelmed the South through sheer numbers.
And finally, on April 8, 1865, General Robert E. Lee of the Confederate forces surrendered at Appomattox, Virginia. And the war was over. And everyone lived happily ever after, right? Well, except for Abraham Lincoln, who was shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth and died the next day. And so 70 more years of war, expansion, and bloodshed ensued. But then America became depressed. And suddenly, over the hills with the sound of a thundering wheelchair, came Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
My fellow Americans, let's be clear. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Because I killed Osama bin Laden.
No, not Obama. FDR.
Oh!
Try it again.
Do not ask what your country can do for you. Instead, ask what you can do for your country.
No, FDR, not JFK.
Oh, wrong acronym.
Just do your normal voice. Come on.
Sorry. How, some time ago, we received a letter from little Amy who lives in Warwickshire, England. Amy writes, "Dear FDR, I'm scared. Germany's acting up. Can you help us?" Well, Amy, this is exactly the kind of letter that really pisses us off. We're in the middle of a depression, but we will beat it. I'm gonna create the FDIC, the WPA, the FBI.
12 years later.
The JFK, the FYI, and the LOL. Oh, I hereby declare war on the Axis powers.
Ladies and gentlemen, back to the exciting conclusion of Rock Fury Super GI.
Oh, my darling Ava, look, the Allies are coming right into my trap. Once they reach Berlin, I will press this button and will release the uber super weapons that will kill us all. Wait, what's that? Oh no, it's a bird. It's a plane. Oh, it's a bird. Yeah, it's a bird. Okay.
No! It's Rock Fury Super GI! Your jig dancing days are over, little man!
But why? Why?
Why? I'll tell you why. In its greed and lust for power, Germany has tried to take over an entire continent.
Wait, isn't that what you did in North America?
Wash your mouth with soap. Why, the Americans stopped land grabbing over 40 years ago. And there's a big difference between our land grabbing and yours.
What's that?
We succeeded. And anyway, we didn't try to wipe out an entire race of people.
What about the Native Americans?
Well, we didn't put our people in concentration camps.
What about the Japanese Americans on the West Coast?
Shut up! Now give me your gun and let's go.
Okay, here's my Luger pistol.
Oh man, I've always wanted to see a Luger pistol. This is so neat. Is this the safety? Bang! It's a good thing we won this war. Otherwise, the German and Japanese economies would have dominated the world. What's that? My super hearing is picking up Alan Alda calling for help in North Korea. Well, I'm off to kick the cans of these Japanese and then mash up some North Koreans. Rock Fury Super GI is off once again, fighting for liberty, justice, and American markets. Whoosh!
And now we move on to the final chapter of American history. And what better way to do that than with the film noir ending? Play it. The name's Dan. Spade Dan. My friends call me Spade Dan. I was sitting there in my office pondering the Cold War when all of a sudden my hand rang.
Hello, Spade. You'll drop this case before you even start it if you know what's good for you.
What case?
Tell you what, if you want to find out the truth behind the Cold War, meet me in Berlin at midnight.
Who is this?
You can just call me Conspiracy Guy.
Conspiracy guy.
Sorry, gotta go. Ciao. Beep.
Huh. Now I needed to find a way to get to Berlin. Maybe I should just turn around. Berlin!
Hello, Spade. You've fallen right into my diabolical trap. Prepare to die.
Oh God! You shot me! I'm gonna die! I'm gonna die, Spade! Before I die, I want to tell you the truth about the Cold War! Who did this? Who benefited?
Who was it?
The generals!
The military?
No, General Motors, General Electric, General Dynamic, they did all this. And I shot JFK, not Lee Harvey Oswald.
Really?
And I shot his brother Bobby too, and Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, all those guys. And I shot JR, and I straightened the bloody gloves so it wouldn't fit OJ anymore. And then I invented the AIDS virus, and I burglarized the Watergate Hotel. And I told Bill Clinton, go ahead, she's just an intern, no one will care. And I made Oprah skinny, and then fat, and then skinny again. And the most diabolical thing of all, I am Donald Trump's hair!
Oh, bang, 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 bang! Click, click, click. Bang, bang, bang! I had to put him out of my misery. So the Cold War was over and I was left with no more answers than when I began. Communism was dead. Well, except for 1 billion people in China, a few 100 million people in North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, Angola, Mozambique, and Iowa. And George Bush was taking the credit for it, but nobody really believed him. Fortunately, his son, George W. Bush, was proving to be the finest president ever elected by the United States Supreme Court. And then, a Kenyan became president. I needed a drink. Well, I think that was the complete history of America. Anything else we need to cover?
Nope, I think that was all the important stuff.
Well, I just want to say, we may have sounded a bit cynical of America today, but that's really not the case. There are so many things we love about America, like Sean Connery, and the Beatles, and Canada!
Everyone loves Canada. So, we covered about 500 years of American history today. Through war, pestilence, assassination. But America doesn't deserve this speech to end on such a down note. So in the great American tradition of optimism, we'd like to bring you
A happy ending! Actually, I don't think we have time for that.
Never mind. I'm Nolan.
I'm John.
And we're history.